The best franchisors are the ones that are working on things so that the business can ramp faster than it did a year ago.
Representing Franchise Secrets, Erik Van Horn.
Jeff, welcome back, man. You look different. I mean, you were just here 2 minutes ago. New
The
shirt.
same Jeff, same
Jeff. I
hat,
got a new
same
hat.
gear.
Okay, we're talking about franchisors, like what great founders do differently, like the fast track to franchisor success. And fast track is not necessarily like that's the thing that can get if you have a 5 to 10 year horizon, then this is for you. If you want to try to sell as many franchise locations, territories as you can in a short period of time, we don't believe that's necessarily what makes great franchise or success. You need to sell franchises, but selling 500 units in 18 months may not set your brand up for the most success 5 or 10 years down the road. It might, but you have to have certain things in place. So Jeff, you built I started a franchisor, you've built franchisors, exited them. Like you're one of the best guys to talk to about like what do great founders do differently than good founders. I know you're a brand guy. You like to talk about brand. You're good with branding. It's kind of the big picture of like the foundation of a launch of a brand. But what would you say? Like, what are some things that you say that great founders do differently than good or even bad founders?
When I think of like what does brand mean, I think that's like the emotional connection between a customer and a company. And you either got it or you don't, right? Or you're either building brand or you're not. And so the brand has to be a storyteller. So who's the chief storyteller of a brand? The founder. In the local community, who's the chief storyteller of the brand? The franchisee, right? So at the end of the day, if you want to hook a customer, right? Whether you have a promotional offer or not, or however you get them really doesn't matter. But if you want to hook them and anchor them and get them coming back and referring other people, then you have to have created an emotional connection. There are needs-based businesses, right? My, my, my there's water coming in my house because my roof is damaged. I need to hire a roofer, right? Roofer comes. Like, how is that experience? Like, how's the communication? Like, do they care about the situation? Did they follow up afterwards? How they followed up, right? Like I, they want me to be able to go out into the world and talk about how great the service was and the company, right? How professional were they? Did they take their shoes off when they walked in the house to give me a quote? I don't know, like whatever it is. But the point is whether it's a needs-based business or it's a service-oriented business that's like a wants-based business, like to win in franchising, you have to be a great storyteller. The brand has to build an emotional connection with the customer. And so like the best franchise companies and brands out there, there's a story to be told. The story of what makes us better than the competitor, the story of why we started this company, the story of why as a franchisee, bought into this business. That's the best brands out there. That's where it really kind of starts, right? A brand has to have a purpose, a brand has to have positioning, and it has to be very clear with everyone within the organization and then everyone out there that's a customer as well.
So I think where people get it wrong, where they don't have a brand. So this is kind of franchisors or even people buying a franchise. If you wonder if the franchisors focus on the brand, good storyteller, all of that, if they start telling you some of their differentiators, if it is our territories are larger, our royalty is less, things like that. I just had a VC guy that I was talking to, and He's like, I don't want to hear that. That's not what makes you different. We talk to brands all the time that start out with that. And it's fine. Like, that they only know what they know up to this point. They don't probably hadn't listened to enough Franchise Secrets podcasts or talked to enough people like us to understand like that's not really what makes you different. And even really good founders that we know, I have one in my mind, Jeff, that we sat down with at a conference, and he was just like telling us our territories are bigger. And we're like, that's not a big deal. And he's like, yes, it is. And then like 2 years later, he's like, guys, I was so stupid back then. Like, I'm so embarrassed that I even tried to fight that battle. And he's like, I understand now. And so we talk to franchisors that are like that all the time. They don't know what they don't know. And they come back and they're like, I get it now. I understand what you guys were saying and why you guys were saying it. So we hope that this episode helps some of you franchisors out there. Jeff, I want to talk about a conversation that we just had with a brand. We really like the founders. The founders are great people, but they're not ready to really scale yet. You know who I'm talking about? Like, I think we
Yes.
could help people sharing a little bit of like what advice we gave them and why we gave them that advice. Cause I would imagine they're not alone out there.
Hmm. Yeah, great people. And they have a business model that's really profitable, which is cool, which is great. I think that like so they opened up a couple locations, sold those to franchisees, and now have like a third location that's like corporately run. And after they sold the two corporate locations to the franchisee, uh, they it stopped growing. It stopped growing, and there's just a lot of opportunity there. I think like with this one, with this business in particular, there's a lot of opportunity to grow the business around, and it kind of this dovetails kind of off of what we were just talking about, is kind of like points of differentiation. And this is the you have to be able to effectively communicate to customers and your employees about like what makes it different and how do you win. And so when I look at like the corporate location today that they have that's really operating well, there's a look, tone, feel, and consistency about how it operates that is different. It really is different than like what's out there. And so they've got a better mousetrap because of like how they engage with the customer, the look, tone, feel of the location, how they communicate with the customer through the service, the membership that they curate. But kind of going into like back to like what makes a great franchisor is to know when to grow and know when to focus internally, right? And for them,
Say that again. Say that again, because that's something that franchisors don't want to hear, but like this is an important, very important.
yeah, look, the dream of franchising is to grow and scale the business nationwide. That's the dream, right?
And everybody out there, besides a handful of people like us, will champion that because they're selling you something like grow and scale. You got something amazing, grow and scale because you can, because other people are doing the same thing. But very rarely do you hear advice like this. Keep going.
Yeah. So like with these folks, I was like, look, you really got something, but like the energy needs to be put onto the two locations that you sold to the franchisee. There's a lot of stuff that they really needed to kind of build out too. And it was kind of a two-person operation, husband and wife. I mean, great people. And once again, very profitable business, high margin, very high margin business. Actually, I was kind of shocked at how high the margins were. But like, I don't think they really kind of had a lot of things kind of dialed in. It's a brick and mortar business. I think that like if you're in the brick and mortar business, you got to have real processes and strategies around like real estate and construction. Like that's before you start, before you're even open, like you got to have pieces around that. There's just a lot of stuff. But like I think it was time. What I mentioned that you wanted me to repeat was kind of like the time and energy needs to be put internally before you kind of try to take it to market and add more people to the bus.
So if you are a franchisor, you have one location's killing it. You have two other locations that are not killing it, and you have a couple franchisees that are struggling. What do they do? Because they need franchisees to continue to have some revenue coming in, to continue growth, to continue momentum. But is that what somebody in that type of position should do?
Yeah, like I I yeah, one of the things that we always talk about is compressing time, right? We talk about building equity by compressing time. Let's kind of go like in a direction here, right? So a lot of times when I've talked to some founders before on some businesses that are doing really well, right? And they're in a market and maybe they've kind of expanded it. They've got multiple trucks or multiple locations and they started the business 20 years ago, right? And it's kind of humming now. And I say to them, all right, what are you doing to like accelerate the speed? Because like a franchisee, it took you 20 years to build the business to where it is today. Franchisee doesn't want to spend 20 years to build the business to get to where you are today, right? The point of buying into a business is that there's ways to accelerate and compress that time, right? So what specifically are you as a franchisor working on today to compress time to ramp the business, right? I'll give you an example, right? How many times have we been on calls with founders and we say, how do you market? And their response is, that's the best part, Eric and Jeff. I don't spend any money on marketing. It's all customer referrals, right? By the way, that is awesome because if your cost of acquiring a customer is zero, then your return on that investment is pretty strong. But maybe that's one of the reasons why it took 10 years to grow the business because you grew it all through word of mouth, right? So we talk to them and say, look, the strategies that you did to integrate yourself into the community, right? Or how you did social media, it worked and it took a long time. And we believe that we can replicate that when we franchise the business. But how do we speed it up, right? Once again, if it took you 10 years to get where you are today because you spent $0 on marketing, holy cow. If we actually hired an agency or hired some marketing people internally and we actually spent a little bit of money on Google or Meta or whatever, and we continue to do the word of mouth stuff, can we get there a little bit faster? Like the thesis is that the answer is yes, right? Like if you built your business on the back of word of mouth and I mean literally how many businesses have we talked to that say I
It's
spend
so common.
$0 on marketing? So
They're
many,
so proud and
which
it's so common.
which is so awesome. But it takes so long of a time to do that. Once again, we just talked about as a franchise, as a franchisee, how to win, network in the community, network with other like-minded business owners, small business owners that share a common customer, right? Like go to events, put your name out there. Like that works. But then you also have to do some other things that help compress that time. Let's take it down to the franchisee level, correct? The first time that you are a franchisee opening a business or a territory, or the first time you launch a sprinter, the first time you open up your retail shop, right? It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to do that the first time. It is. I promise you, it's going to be hard because you're doing everything for the first time, right? Do you think logically it's going to be easier to do it the second time? Whether that's your second sprinter or your second retail location. You have to believe it's going to be easier to do it the second time in a row, right? Think of like stuff that you do in your daily life. Like you want to exercise, right? And you want to go out and you want to run a mile. The first time you ever run a mile, it's like, oh my God, this is really hard. But if you did it every single day, it gets easier, right? Like anything that you do in this world, if you do it with repetition, it becomes easier, right? This is just logic. I was a philosophy major in college, so like logic is part of that deal, right? So so let's say that your very first location, your goal is to get that to $100,000 in revenue, right? And you monitor the amount of time that it takes you get to $100,000 in revenue for the year, right? Whether that's a month or a year or 2 years or 10 years, there's a certain amount of time, right? On your first location, whether it's service or brick and mortar, doesn't matter. Just follow my math here, right? The second time you do it, right? Do you think you can get there faster? I'm asking you, Eric. Do you think you could get there faster?
100%.
Yeah. Why? Because you're leaning on previous experiences, right? You are iterating, you are taking things that worked and you're making those bigger, faster, stronger. You are trying to minimize the mistakes you made the very first time, right? And if you combine those two things, the iterations on what worked to make them bigger, faster, stronger, and trying to minimize the mistakes you made the first time, if you put those together, you will get there faster. I promise you will. Now let's talk about the third time. The third time should be easier than the second time and infinitely better than the first time, right? And the best franchisors are the ones that continually, that you have to try things as a franchisor. You have to, right? Some of them are going to work. And the ones that work, you have to iterate them on how to make them bigger, faster, stronger. And the things that you try that don't work, you either try them a different way or you just don't do that anymore, right? You try to minimize the mistakes. This is how you optimize a business. And these are the best franchisors that are out there, right? So when I think about when we talk to franchisors, or they're not even a franchise, we talk to businesses that want to franchise their business. And we're like, how do you get customers? And they say, this is how I get them. Like, how much money do you spend? They like, I don't spend any money on marketing. Okay, that's great. I think of that as an opportunity, right? If they've built this business on the backs of word of mouth their entire career, then if we continue to do the best things that are working there, they tried things, right, on the word of mouth side that worked. So let's make those bigger, faster, stronger. They tried things and maybe invested some time and energy on some things that didn't work. So let's not do that anymore. But then now let's put together some campaigns. Let's start spending some money. Why? Because we want to be able to get there fast. We want to be able to get there fast. Right? And we know that the first time that a franchisee goes through something, it might take a little bit longer. The second time they go through something, it's going to become faster. The third time, faster. The fourth time, faster. The fifth time, faster. You see it a lot of times when a founder, a lot of things that we do are brick and mortar, right? You see a lot of times where their first location took this much time to ramp. Their second location took this much time to ramp. Their third location took this much time to ramp, right? But they had to do everything on their own, right? They didn't have strategic advisors. They did 100% word of mouth marketing. They didn't have agencies putting together campaigns or agency placing ads for them, right? They were running their business off of whatever the out of the box POS system had. They didn't plug in any other tech tools to the tech stack to optimize the business, right? And so what we try to find out there is we try to find great businesses that have been operating for a long time that we say, wow, what would happen if we brought more of our experiences and our knowledge to the table? What would happen if we started to build a leadership team? What would happen if we brought in some vendors, suppliers, and agencies to do some things that this brand has never done? Could we get there faster? The answer is yes. And that's what every private equity company is looking to do on the planet. When they invest time, money, and energy into a business, they are saying what is working and how can we optimize what it's working so that we can get there faster than you got there in the past. Right? What is not working? What can we change around why it's not working to make it work? Or what do we have to do to decrease some costs and just get rid of that piece to optimize the business, right? The best franchisors are the ones that are working on things so that the business can ramp faster than it did a year ago, right? Now, if I look in real time today, I can say there are things that we are doing today that allow my franchisees to get there faster than what I did in the past, right? That's real time. And that's improvement because I know that we're going to be able to get there faster than what they did in the past, right? That's the real time piece. Now, between now and the next 2 years, I have to continue as a franchisor to continue to iterate and innovate and make things bigger, faster, stronger than they were yesterday. I have to continue to do that, right? So in 2 years from now, they should be operating way faster, way bigger, way stronger than where I am today. Today, I can say it's better today than it was yesterday. But as a franchisor to win and to be the best franchisor out there, 2 years from now needs to be a better version in every way, shape, and form that it is today. It needs to be moving faster to equip franchisees to scale faster. Now, if I'm a franchisee, I'm like, I want it now. I want it now. I get that. But is it better today than it was a year ago or 2 years ago? Can we ramp the business faster today because we have tools, right, today that we didn't have in the past? We have marketing strategies, right? And we're making investments in marketing today that the founder never did ever, right? I never spent $1 on marketing. That is so awesome. But what if you had? Would you have been able to scale it faster, right? If you had built up a leadership team, would you have been able to get there faster? If you added other vendors, suppliers, agencies to the business, if you would have done this or that, oh my, they you know what they all said? They say yes, I would have gotten there faster, right? So it's every version of the future should be faster than today's version. Right? Just like you as a franchisee, if you own a sprinter based business, right? Whether you're power washing houses or you're doing restoration or we just launched something in air purification, whatever it is, the first time you take that sprinter out into the world, it's going to take a while to ramp it. But you have to believe that the second sprinter you put out into the market is going to ramp faster than the first sprinter. If you don't believe that, you need to get out of the business today. If the franchisor is not working on things to make things happen bigger, faster, stronger in the future than they are today, right? Then they won't win either. That's the belief. We have to continue to work on that.
Attention, franchisors and franchisees. There are two really important resources that I want to share with you that will help you avoid costly mistakes and increase your enterprise value. The first is our free Facebook group. It's a community that has over 4,000 franchisees and franchisors in it. When somebody asks a question, they get honest and authentic answers from multiple perspectives. You can join the group for free over at franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. The second resource I want to share with you is if you're a franchisee and you want to be around a community of successful Zs and other brands and in other industries, this is why I created the Franchisee Mastermind. If you want access to the best single and multi-unit owners to know what they're doing, or if you want to be around other multi-brand owners, then you'll want to check out my Franchisee Mastermind. The reason why people join is they want access to my Rolodex, my connections, to each other. They want a shortcut success, both short-term and long-term. Links will be in the show notes or at scalablefranchise.com. So I think franchisors and franchisees want to be further ahead than where they are. So we talk about on the other podcasts, like consistency, repetition, that stuff compounds. And,
Yes.
Do franchisees wish that the brand was 10 years ahead in terms of all the tools, all the learnings, everything that they had? Of course they wish it was, 5 or 10 years ahead. But emerging brands are where they are, and you want them always improving. Too much improvement or spending too much on time or, attention or money on trying to do some of this stuff too quickly will probably divert energy or spend money where it doesn't need to be spent. The brand might be focused on the wrong things because they are trying to be a much bigger brand too soon. So, like, where's the balance on continuous improvement, learning from franchisees, learning from opening up more locations versus just spending $2 million to have better technology or,
Well, you got to start with you got this. Yeah, you gotta wind things back to like zero, right? You have to like where is there opportunity? You have to focus. You have to focus on piece of your business where there is opportunity. So, um, so going to this business yesterday, right? It's like, okay, so you have customers that come in for the very first time. You have a promotional offer to get people to come try your service for the very first time. By the way, that's not novel. That's pretty much every business on the planet has some kind of offering to try it the very first time. Agreed? Do you agree with that?
Yep.
So from there, it's okay, what do you want them to do? Like, what do you want them to do? And they said, well, we want them to become a member. Great. So they have a membership. I love that. Reoccurring revenue is super fun, right? And I said, okay, well, right now, if 10 new people come in today and they're brand new, right? They accepted your offer to try it for the first time. How many of these people do you think you can convert? And they said 30%. Right. Is there room for improvement there? Could you ever get it to 40? I believe so. Great. So let's strategize on how to get your conversion from 30 to 40%. What have you tried? And what's the process today? What have you tried before? Let's get creative and think of other ways to do it. And so really focusing in how to increase their conversion from 30 to 40%. Right? That's an example of what I'm talking about. And if you take that small little change across month day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, all of a sudden that makes a pretty profound change on the profitability of the business. Right? Then I said, well, what's your churn? Their churn was kind of high, right? And I was like, great. So what can we do to minimize churn? Right? Let's really focus in on membership retention, right? And so now if you have come up with a strategy and an executable plan to decrease churn while at the same time really dialed in on how to go from 30 to 40% conversion on the membership, you do both of those at the same time and then take that back to the P&L, look at how it starts to really widen up. I think that for them, that was hopefully a light bulb moment where it's like, you don't have to do everything right to fix the business. Just like, how do I convert more trial members to members? And how do I retain more of the members that I did and run that out for 12 months, 24 months and see the impact that it has, right? They had 4 different levels of membership. Most people come in at the first level. So the third piece is how do you get more people to come in at the second or third level? Now look into higher conversion. Now look into stronger retention. Put those 3 pieces together, right? And then what I said was, I'm like, take that and take that back to the locations and really get that humming before you really kind of go out there to market and try to expand. Because that's the piece that's been lost with the 2 locations that they had started out with corporate that they sold to a franchisee.
What do you think about the founder? So let's say there's some good growth happening and the founder is like most founders, they probably not the most amazing at operations. They're more visionary, or they may be great at marketing or not great at marketing, or like they might be great at operations or not great, and they need to have that second in command or the yin to their yang or the visionary or the integrator. It's time to grow something big here, and you can't operate as a small business with a small mind anymore. Like, talk to me about that, because we've seen founders hang on too long to because it's their baby. They don't want to bring anybody else that could possibly make some decisions that they may or may not agree with, or they might want to give up control too fast. And I'm not talking about any of our own portfolio brands right now. I'm talking about just all these brands that we talk to that are various different stages of growth. So I think there's a time or the ability, even just the ability for a founder to recognize like they probably have a leadership lid, or they have to hire for their weaknesses, and their weaknesses may not be
Yeah.
fully exposed until they
Hire or
have more on
outsource.
their plate.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, a really good book. I mean, I just do books on tape because it's a lot easier for me.
Where do you get the tape player?
Well, I just go through Audible. I use Audible,
Oh, okay. Okay, that kind of tape.
download
Okay,
books on
gotcha.
tape. Yeah, you know what I mean. Um, but I use Audible and I try to go through like one or two a month. And like one that's like so quick, it's such a quick read or such a quick listen is like Rocket Fuel. You got to have, you got to identify like in order to win as a franchisor, you have to innovate, right? You have to continue to make things bigger, faster, stronger. Like a big chunk of what we've been talking about is like, what is working? How do I iterate it? How do I innovate to make it bigger, faster, stronger, to compress time? Like that's spent a lot of time talking about that, right? So somebody in the organization has to be innovating around the product or the service or the processes, right? They have to have the vision and the strategy of what they want the business to look like in a couple years versus today, or what they want to look like 6 months from today, right? That type of person, that I probably kind of fit into that piece. Like I think I'm somebody that kind of like strategy and vision is something that I think I'm better at than other things. Right? But then I have to have some really good like integrators, operators, people that can actually take that vision and that strategy and put together the SOPs, put together the building blocks, put together the education. Right? Then somebody else has to be the educator, take what the integrator put together and actually educate and train with consistency. Right. Um, and so like I think you need to take a look at like your organization, right? And what do you do well? Do you have a partner? What do they do well? And then like what's missing? And whether you hire it or you outsource it, you have to put together kind of like here's who does what from an org chart standpoint. And maybe everybody's outsourced. That's okay. When you're small, you're not going to go out and hire a bunch of people. It just doesn't make any sense just to burn through money. Eventually you can switch somebody from an outsourced position to an insource when the time is right. But I think that that's really critical from a franchisor perspective is who it's got to start with strategy and vision. Who is in charge of that? And in a lot of cases, that is the founder. That is the founder. I mean, that's been the essence of the business, right? Or if there's a partnership group, somebody within their partnership group, I promise, is like the strategy and vision person. Maybe it's a couple people, whatever, doesn't matter. But then who are the integrators, right? Who are going to build the processes, the building blocks, the SOPs? Then who in the organization is going to take those pieces and put them to use? The educators, the trainers, the monitors, the quality control, right? So I think that that's really important is you have to have somebody around marketing, you have to have somebody around operations, you have to have somebody around finance, you have to have somebody around strategy and vision. You have to have somebody around like content creation. Got to have somebody around sales, like just who in your organization, like, and once again, you don't have to hire all these things, whether you're a franchisee or franchisor, you don't have to hire all these people, but you got to build your team so that you can go out there and win.
All right. So, last kind of point that I think we should make is people buy into a franchise for consistency. And then they get in and I think it's human
They want to
nature.
do it their way.
They want to do it their way. The consistency
Yeah.
goes out the door unless their neighbor is being inconsistent and doing something to drive that franchisee crazy or dilute the brand or something like that. So, I love to talk about like how the brand can get diluted because there's no quality control
Yeah.
and there's rogue branding going on. There's inconsistent
Yeah.
customer experience. This is an important one, and this is no fun for the franchisor to enforce because franchisees don't fully understand it from the franchisor standpoint. So let's talk about that a
Yeah.
little bit.
How many times have you heard, how many times have you heard this? My market's different. My market's
I used to
different.
say it, Jeff. I used to say it. I used to believe it.
I mean, come on now. My market's that you don't get it. My market's different. We have to do it this way to win. So one of the things that I think about a lot is um you have this franchise agreement, right? And I think of like the franchise agreement as kind of like it's really the brand standard, right? And it's kind of like it's a sandbox to play in and to win, right? Together. The There are so many times where there has to be a process to allow for innovation, right? So like when you create a franchise agreement today, there's probably going to be something in the future that is going to come in where you need to change the way that the franchise agreement reads just because the world's rotating a different direction. Like the just kind of like an example, like everything that's happening in AI, like it's going to just be such a huge piece of how we operate businesses. And I don't know like how much there are in current franchise agreements around certain pieces along that. Like it's just going to have to happen. I think when people read franchise agreements, they feel like it was written for them, right? So it's like you have to do this, you have to do that. So if I'm reading that, it's like, I have to do this, I have to do that. The reality is that these things around a franchise agreement or how we operate the business are there to do it a consistent way to protect the brand. Because if I'm a franchisee and I'm doing everything according to brand standards, and there's another franchisee in my market that is not doing things to brand standards and it affects my business, I want to be able to go to the franchisor and be like, look, man, I am running my business according to the brand standards, but there's another franchisee in this market that isn't, and it's affecting my business. There has to be some enforcement from the franchisor to cure that situation with that other franchisee because I don't want it affecting my business because I'm running to brand standards, right? That's what you want. If you are running to brand standards, but somebody else in your market is not, and so it's an inconsistent experience for the customers, that's going to affect my business. If I only get 5 stars, but another franchisee in my market only gets 3 stars, it affects the brand in my market. And so I want to go to the franchisor and say, look, you've got to work with this franchisee to get in line into the brand standards and work with them on them leveling up their game because I'm only getting 5 stars, but they're getting 3 stars, right? Now switch that around. And now you're the franchisee that doesn't want to follow brand standards. You want to do it your way because your market is different, right? What's the enforcement? In the other scenario, you went to the franchisor and said, I need your help with this other franchisee that is not following brand standards, not building the brand in my market. it is creating problems for me, right? You want the franchisor to be able to protect that brand, protect those brand standards, and provide consistency in the market to the customers we serve. Yeah, great. But the same has to go to me then. I have to be held accountable to following that brand standard. And so if I'm a franchisee that just wants to keep doing it my way because I think it's better, right? It's going to affect the whole business. And so I can't be somebody that says, I don't want to be held accountable for following brand standards, but I want you to hold somebody else accountable for following brand standards. You can't have it both ways. The reason there are brand standards, the reason the franchise agreement that franchisees sign has brand standards of how we operate this way, right? Here's the thing. Every franchise agreement is going to say, this is how we operate. The franchise agreement is also going to say, if there's an alternative way to operate other than what we've just laid out, here is the process for that, right? So that's okay too. Like it once again, the franchise agreement is probably going to change every single year because it's getting smarter on how things operate versus last year, right? Franchise agreements 20 years ago probably had brand standards around how to place ads in Craigslist. That doesn't even exist anymore, right? So it's like things are just going to change throughout time, right? So you have to get used to the fact that like the brand standards and how we operate, it's going to change every single year. The franchise agreement is going to change every single year. It has to, right? It has to adapt with reality. And then if there is something that you want to try as a franchisee that's not currently in the franchise agreement, there has to be a path to do so. And I promise you that path is probably laid out, right? In other words, if you want to try something, you need approval. And this is how we get things approved. This is how we operate. Because if it's good for you, if you want to try something and you go through that process and we say, hey, let's do it. If it works for you, why wouldn't we take it to the whole system? Where I think everybody gets into trouble and where the brand falls apart is when everybody wants to do it their way, right? Most franchisors are either going to insource marketing or outsource marketing. Like that's kind of how it works, right? They're going to have a marketing plan or campaign every month. They're going to have people that create, they're going to have people that run ads, right? And a lot of times franchisees say, well, I want to do it locally. I got a guy. Fine. Here is the process and the franchise agreement to get your company, your team approved as an approved vendor. And if they start doing things that work, holy cow, we're going to fold that into the whole system. But I think that like where franchising doesn't work is when everybody just wants to do it their own way, because then there's no customer consistency from location to location. The messaging is all wrong. You can see where it breaks down because when you go from location to location, you'll see different font. You'll see different brand voice. You'll see different brand positioning. And then it's no longer a we. It's no longer a we are building this together. It's like, hey, so look, as a franchisor, you want to be flexible too to create opportunity for franchisees to bring great ideas and to try new things. Absolutely. And the stuff that they do, holy cow, it's folded into the whole system. But when it's just like, I want to do it my way, that doesn't work either. And so like there has to be the strength of your brand standards and the strength of enforceability around those brand standards are what's best for everyone involved.
Yeah, that's stuff that it's not easy. This is what's not easy about franchising for franchisors and franchisees. This is why Greg Nathan has the 10 or I think the 7 stages of a franchisee, because they all go through these different stages. And franchisors don't recognize where their franchisees are at in these stages and how to communicate with them and deal with them. It's a recipe for disaster for franchisees and franchisors. That's why I think some of the conversations that you and I have in the franchisor mastermind are how franchisors should be communicating with different types of franchisees. New franchisee, crushing it, or, getting crushed in the marketplace, or having a great attitude or a bad attitude. And, what's great, most of the franchisors that we talk to really care about the franchisees, and they want the franchisees
Yeah.
to succeed. And I think that's probably the thing that most franchisees don't fully realize, because they don't get to see the conversations that you and I get to have with all these different brands. A lot of these franchisors really care about the franchisees, want them to succeed, want to help them in any way that they can. And that's one of the probably the favorite things that I get to do, talking to so many new different brands out there, is these founders are really pro franchisee. And we talk to some that aren't. We'll never work with a brand like that, but I think that's refreshing. I just wanted to share that with the franchisees out there. Your franchisor is probably more pro franchisee than you might realize. At least I hope so. And behind the scenes, talking to a lot of emerging brands, it's definitely the case. Jeff, any last words before I let you go?
No, I mean, just last comment on that stuff is it's like the best systems that I've been a part of are the ones where the ones that are the systems that are working the best is when the community is focused on what's winning now and how do we make that bigger, faster, stronger. Those are the brands that are winning. The brands that are losing are when the community is, let's focus on what's not working and let's just keep talking about why it's not working versus how to make it better. I mean, that's just a fact. It's are we working on taking what's working and making it bigger, faster, stronger? Or do we want to spend all of our time on what's not working? Like, once again, this, whether it's a franchise or not, the best companies in the world are looking at how do we take what's working and improve it.
Boom.
All right, dude.
Thanks for coming on again. My most
Yeah.
regular.
All right, dude.
Thanks for listening to the Franchise Secrets podcast. Links to everything can be found over at franchisesecrets.com. And if you want my help with anything from starting your own franchise to growing your current franchise business, please visit scalablefranchise.com.